This stage now, what we have to do now is to load this page. If I go ahead and save it now and pull up the browser and refresh the page, our page is still loading, no problem. So what I can do to prove it, I can go ahead and type my password, prove it again as my password. When I enter, we should see the output, prove it again. So our email and password are echoed back to us. All right. So now let's use this opportunity to do some debugging. Now, if I go ahead and call this process form and put it there before the load module function, this code is likely to throw error. It's throwing error. It's an undefined property login module called to a member function process form. Okay, so what's happening here now is because this process form is implemented in a login class, right? Calls the process form implemented in the login module class. All right. So this is the method being called at the moment, right? But the code that is calling it is the process form implemented in the login class as well. Okay, so they are sharing the same name. But what's happening, because this load module function returns that object, this module class object, to be used to call that method implemented in the module class, right? You have called it here before that object becomes available. So bear that in mind. So as the program flows, this module object is not available yet, but you are using it to call a method implemented in the module class. So that will cause a problem. Okay, so you paste it right there, and the code will run accordingly, no problem. So let me show you. If you don't use this keyword here, where is that? If you don't use this keyword here and there as well, if you run this code, it will cause problem as well. A different problem, right? You see? So login view not found, and therefore you cannot use that to call the method. So you are using this module object within this function. It's not been defined, and you are using this module object with the intention to use that object to call a method from a different class. See, so that will cause problem. And to avoid that problem, all you have to do is to put this keyword there and put this view there. So this keyword, you know when to use it and when not to use it. Right? So that's what I'm trying to establish here. So by the time you go ahead and refresh this page, there will be no problem. And as my password, when I enter, no problem. Okay, so that's that aspect of inheritance taking place. Okay, so at this stage now, what we want to do, we have to move this controller in a different class, in a different folder. So we go ahead and cut that out from there, open up a new file. By the time you choose your language, PHP block, and then paste it right there. So in our naming convention, our class name for controllers should be saved same as the file name. So we will now create a new folder, call it controllers. And all our page controllers will be saved the same name as the class name in that file. That's the reason for that. It will be easier in our code to retrieve that value. So what we have to do now, before you can create instance of the class, you simply have to require or include the file they are coming from, which is now in the controllers folder, and file name as the class name. So by the time you refresh this page, it will run no problem. So all we've done is to move that class about and bring it in by using the require command. Okay, so that's still running, no problem. So at this stage, you may want to create Say for instance you want to create a class called database, right? And you also want to create a class called model. This represents your database class. In some cases, when you're creating your models, you may want to query your database. I'll go ahead and create a function block, call it select, and create more other. So these are the functions you can use to query our database. All right. You need to update database, insert into table, and all right. So what we want this model class to do is simply to implement a constructor function that will return instance of the model class of that database class. That's as simple as that. So you create an object, a class of instance, call it a DB, and then let it hold the value of the database class. So likewise, the same thing controller is doing for the page controllers by giving them two class instances for the view class and for the model class is what model class is doing for the independent model classes that extends from it. So login model, if login model extends model, it will now be able to use this DB object to call method from the database class. So let me prove it to you very quickly by outputting a statement from this database class. Say, call this select statement from the database class, or select function from the database class, like that. Okay. So when you see this output to you, you know that it's coming from this function. So simply what this means, object of inheritance taken on here with the concept of inheritance, meaning that any class that extends model and call the constructor function here, we'll be able to use that to call methods. So let's see if that is. And now all you have to do is simply come and call that parent constructor function. So by the time you do that, now you're calling the parent constructor function. When instance of this class is created, that DB object will also be available to be used to call method within this function. And so let's see. So go ahead and call this DB invoking method. So by the time we submit this form, we should see that output from the database, because it says this class extends model and call that parent constructor function that returns this DB object. So anywhere within this code, you can use that DB object to query your database. This is how you can establish relationship between your page models and the database class, using the model class as a mediator between the database class and the independent login model classes. Okay, so let's try that. If you go ahead and refresh the page, your browser, and type your password again, by the time you submit, you will see that select function from the database class. So simply, this is how we can establish relationship between the database class and the independent page models. So at this stage now, we can see that our model view controller framework is complete. So all we need to do now is to create a bootstrap class that will house our code for us. So let's go ahead and do that. Create another class, call it bootstrap. All right. And let's say for now you want to implement just a constructor. So by the time you create instance of this class now, all that code will run, no problem. You see, so object-oriented programming is no different from what you know already. All you're doing is simply wrapping up all your code in functions and creating instance of the class and using that class instance to call those functions. The same line of code will run line by line, no problem. As though you have written them without wrapping up in a function. Okay. So, Mr. Show Me Again, as your password when you enter, that will be it. Okay. So now you know what we are doing. Alright, at this stage I'll stop this video here and continue from the next video to tell you how we can create a Bootstrap class that will load our pages, our individual page controllers for us. Okay, so thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.